A desolate desert somewhere in Mexico. A young couple pulls over their pickup truck, and the driver pretends to fiddle with the engine. Meanwhile, his girlfriend zooms in on a military base located nearby. The soldiers notice the suspicious object, but due to their heavy workload, they don't pay it much attention. They are far more concerned with the bodies recently found in the jungle. Right during their conversation, a military helicopter lands at the base, unloading its cargo. 9 body bags destined for the Mexican morgue and being hunted by the pair of accidental tourists. 2 weeks before the current events, a small twin-engine plane departing from Guatemala flies over the green jungles of Mexico. On board are just 8 passengers, 1 flight attendant, and the ship's captain. First, the navigation system fails. Then, the communication system goes out, leaving the pilot unable to report back to ground control. To top it all off, they are running out of fuel. Realizing where things are headed, the captain sends a final message to his beloved and says goodbye. Now even the passengers notice that something terrible is happening. The engines sputter out and the plane plunges down toward the treetops. Within a minute, the aircraft crashes to the ground, splitting in half. The sole casualty is the flight attendant. The other passengers survive and manage to escape the wreckage, bringing along the injured pilot who suffered the most. Sonia checks the galley area and finds a few bottles of water, a couple of sandwiches, and a few servings of salad. It's only enough to last 9 people for a couple of days, but the survivors remain hopeful that rescuers will soon be dispatched. The pilot regains consciousness, and the men manage to question him. They learn about the communication system failure and that the GPS was also down, likely preventing any transmission of their coordinates to the ground. Realizing they might be stuck together for a while, Zach suggests they introduce themselves. He shares his story first, and soon everyone joins in, sharing pieces of their lives. Recalling an earlier conversation on board, Zach realizes that among them is a doctor, the cowardly Kevin. And even though Kevin is more terrified than anyone else, no one but him has the skills to help the pilot. Kevin isn't thrilled about the idea. Judging by the injury, the pilot has serious lung damage and requires surgery. Under pressure from the group, Kevin reluctantly agrees to risk it and perform the operation right there in the jungle, with only makeshift supplies. It turns out that the heavy-set Travis has a suitable sharp knife. Sonia finds a bottle of something strong in the minibar and a small first aid kit with bandages and plasters in the cabin. Not wanting to see what's about to happen, the young couple retreats to the wrecked plane. During their conversation, Amy spots someone lurking outside the window, but her boyfriend, Dan, is convinced she's just seeing things. The surgery goes well, and Kevin stitches up the wound using materials he had just bought in Guatemala. The pilot falls asleep, and now all they can do is wait to see how he fares post-surgery. But during the night, someone puts an end to the patient's suffering, leaving him no chance of survival. When the tourists discover the body, everyone assumes he simply died from complications and blood poisoning. The action shifts back to the military base. Upon checking the records, the commander finds the names of the deceased and spots the first inconsistency. They have 10 passports, but only 9 bodies were found. Kevin falls into depression, blaming himself for the pilot's death, but everyone tries to comfort him, pointing out that at least they tried to save him. Zach and the doctor decide to move the body away from the camp, and wanting to help, Dan steals the pilot's phone in hopes of catching a signal and calling for help. Dan, the quiet one, sneaks into the forest under the pretext of relieving himself. But armed with Travis's knife, he takes the dead pilot's finger to unlock the phone. Lisa is the first to sense that something is wrong. She quietly calls her husband over and whispers that the pilot didn't die from an infection. Someone helped him along. The marks on his face made it obvious, but for some reason, no one had paid attention. The woman is deeply disturbed by the fact that the criminal is still among them, and she asks her husband to stick close. The men search through the plane wreckage and find a surviving GPS switch. Carlos is familiar with such devices, and he's confident they can use it to call for help. But to do so, they'll have to climb a mountain located several kilometers away from camp. Everyone agrees they need to take the risk, but setting out now would be too dangerous. They decide to wait for early morning to avoid the extreme heat. Amy once again spots someone in the bushes who doesn't belong to their group, but before she can even blink, the figure vanishes. The girl begins to doubt her own sanity, wondering if the heat is playing tricks on her mind. Amy isn't the only one troubled. Travis tells his wife that his heart medication has disappeared from his bag. Without it, he could die at any moment. Besides Travis's medicine, some of their water supplies are also missing. Upon discovering this, Sonia reports the theft to Zach and admits she doesn't trust the others, sensing something's wrong. Zach realized she could just be trying to divert suspicion from herself, but to prove her innocence, Sonia shows him photos on her tablet. She travels the world documenting the lives of refugees. As soon as the sun sets, the group decides to scout the area and look for drinking water. Not far from camp, Kevin spots some unusually beautiful mushrooms, but Sonia warns him that they are black angels, deadly poisonous, with even the tiniest bite being fatal. Dan and Amy are the first to find fresh water deep in the forest. Overjoyed, Dan strips off his clothes, eager to plunge into the tiny pool, but Carlos stops him just in time. He explains that this is part of a cave system. No one can predict how deep it is or what creatures might lurk underwater. Dan laughs at his friend, but decides to throw in a sneaker instead. In that very instant, something snatches it and drags it under. A gunshot rings out from deeper in the woods, and the group forgets the swamp entirely, racing back to camp. Fortunately, nothing terrible has happened. It's just Travis, who found a shotgun among the luggage and started hunting monkeys. Not everyone is happy about the fat guy having a gun, but the promise of fresh meat smooths things over. Moreover, the group figures out how to collect fresh water using a metal thermos. They fashion a makeshift filtration system out of plastic tubes and bags, producing water that's safe enough to drink. For the first time, it feels like they might actually survive until rescue arrives. A hearty dinner prepared by Lisa reinvigorates everyone. Gathered around the campfire, the group starts pressing Carlos with questions. In their eyes, he's the most suspicious, always hauling around a suitcase he even risked his life for when the plane caught fire. Carlos tries to dodge the conversation, but when the suspicion becomes too overwhelming, he opens his trunk and pulls out a superhero mask. He tells his new friends that in everyday life, he's a luchador, the famous Rapido, a professional wrestler. The mask is the most precious thing he owns, because only when he wears it does he feel like his true self. After a filling dinner and their campfire chats, the tourists finally drift off to sleep. Without his pills, Travis feels terrible, and his wife hands him a bottle of water to ease the discomfort. Meanwhile, someone prowls around the wreckage. Reaching under a fallen tree, they retrieve a satellite phone. A call is made from that phone, a signal that travels dozens of kilometers. On the other end, the same young woman answers, the one who will soon park in the desert to monitor the transport of 9 bodies. The next morning, the group is jolted awake by Lisa's screams. She has just woken up to find her husband having a heart attack and struggling to breathe. Zach tries to help the man while Sonia runs to fetch Kevin, but all attempts to save Travis are in vain. His heart stops right before his wife's eyes. Sonia becomes the first suspect. After all, she had been the one telling Kevin about the mushrooms, meaning she could have used them. Lisa can no longer hold back and vents everything that's been building up inside her these past days. She refuses to accept the explanation that her husband died from a heart attack, reminding everyone that the pilot didn't die from infection either. Someone helped him along. Sonia and Zach retreat into the wrecked plane to discuss everything privately. They don't believe in coincidence, and recalling how Travis had taken Amy's plate, they come to the conclusion that Amy was the intended target. Additionally, Zach discovers that all of their fresh water and remaining food supplies are gone. This means someone is indeed trying to eliminate competitors and boost their own chances of survival. Dan decides it's finally time to tell the group that he had taken the pilot's phone and managed to unlock it. He plays a recording the captain had made for his wife, and it contains disturbing revelations. The pilot warned his beloved that even if he managed to land the plane, certain people would make sure to eliminate him and all the passengers. Reviewing the passports of the deceased, one of the officers recognizes Rapido, a famous fighter who was a hero to millions. Lost in thought, the officer tells his commander about Rapido's last fight, where he faced an opponent known as the Governor, a cheater who broke the rules and secured a dirty win. Carlos himself had been dwelling on that fight too, dreaming of revenge. He had been on his way to Houston for a rematch, and now, stranded in the deserted jungle, all he could think about was getting out and stepping back into the ring. But Carlos's noble image fades when he pulls a stolen chocolate bar from a secret stash, something he selfishly refused to share with the others. After her husband's death, Lisa withdraws into herself, losing all trust in anyone. She voices her suspicions to Amy, but the girl refuses to believe that the traitor is one of them. Amy is convinced that someone else is out there, someone trying to pick them off one by one. Amy's suspicions are soon confirmed. She once again spots a stranger in the jungle, but she can't get a good look at his face. The figure vanishes like a ghost, and Amy, afraid of being labeled crazy, decides not to tell Dan about it. Carlos prepares for the expedition to the mountain, but it's too dangerous for everyone to go. After discussing their plan, the group decides that Carlos, Sonia, and Kevin will make the climb, while the others stay behind to guard the camp. The climb proves grueling, and the group takes turns carrying the bulky transmitter, trying to reach the top before the heat becomes unbearable. When it's Sonia's turn, she slips and nearly drops the device over the cliff's edge. She risks her life to save it, but fortunately, she succeeds, and the team continues their ascent. Meanwhile, back at camp, the others are keeping busy. Lisa goes hunting while Dan works on purifying more water to replenish their supply. However, the constant tension takes its toll and a fight breaks out between Dan and Amy. During the argument, Dan grabs his girlfriend's arm roughly, frightening her. Carlos's team finally reaches their destination. The young fighter hooks up the transmitter and sets up the antenna. Once they hear the system successfully transmitting a signal, and knowing that now it's only a matter of waiting, Sonia urges them to hurry back. They must return before dark. Unaware of how the mission went, the people back at camp grow increasingly nervous. Dusk is falling, and there's still no sign of their friends. Trying to lift his spirits, Dan decides to crack open the last surviving bottle of bourbon hidden in the plane. Upset both by his drinking and his constant lying, Amy storms off into the jungle to be alone and to figure out who she keeps seeing among the trees. While Dan searches for her among the thick foliage, the trio finally returns to camp and informs everyone that the transmitter is up and running. Now it's only a matter of waiting, and most likely help will arrive within the next few hours. Dan eventually finds Amy, and she insists that someone has been watching her all along. She also confronts her boyfriend about the business cards she found in his wallet. Dan had always told her he was a writer, but it turns out he's just a regular lawyer from a small provincial town. Zach prepares dinner using the meat Lisa hunted, and once again, the group settles around the fire, discussing their chances of being rescued soon. Hope begins to stir among them, and overwhelmed by emotions, some members of the group find it hard to fall asleep. Carlos heads into the jungle to exercise a little, but when he glances back, he sees a man wearing his mask and is immediately struck by a sharp blade. When the tourists notice Carlos's disappearance, they grow worried, suspecting he might have run away. Only Lisa understands that there was no escape. Carlos has become the next victim, and soon someone else will follow. Zach decides to circle the camp and try to find Carlos, but Kevin voices a different concern. Why is everyone so focused on this when no one has asked why the helicopter still hasn't come? And with good reason, the transmitter installed the previous day is no longer sending a signal because someone disabled it. Sonia and Zach stay behind at camp while the others search for Carlos. Remembering the pilot's recording, Zach decides to search the plane, hoping to find out why they were all marked for death. But even a thorough search turns up nothing, and Sonia suggests focusing on a more urgent issue, returning to check the transmitter. This time, Sonia and Kevin set off together, believing that since they know the route, they can move much faster. Dan, Amy, Lisa, and Zach stay behind, and when Lisa notices that Zach has wandered off somewhere, she decides to follow him. Climbing to a small ridge, Sonia spots a flock of crows circling something nearby. She decides to head down and see for herself what has caught their attention. While Sonia and Kevin push through the underbrush, back at camp, Amy wakes up to someone calling her from deep within the jungle. Arming herself with a burning stick, she follows the voice and sees a villain armed with a rifle. But when she finally catches up and stabs him through the chest, the terrible truth is revealed. It was all a hallucination. Amy had just stabbed Dan straight through the heart, and the boy collapses to the ground, clutching his wound. Meanwhile, Sonia and Kevin reach their destination and confirm their worst fears. The crows were circling over Carlos's body. Lisa had been right all along. As night falls, the survivors regroup at the camp. Kevin manages to stop the bleeding and stabilize Dan's condition, but Dan begs everyone not to punish Amy for what happened. He reveals a secret. Amy had undergone psychiatric therapy in the past, and under the current stress, her condition has worsened. Dan assures everyone that Amy couldn't have committed the other crimes, that his injury was nothing but a tragic accident. Still, the group decides to inspect Carlos's body to understand what really happened. Carlos's death raises even more questions, and no one seems to have the answers. But it turns out Zach had been closest to the truth. He just hadn't been thorough enough when inspecting the fuselage. Meanwhile, a team from the Civil Aviation Authority arrives at the company that owned the downed plane. The inspectors are interested in numerous violations and demand explanations from the company's director, Cora de Leon, the same woman seen earlier in the desert SUV. Cora listens to the visitors carefully but refuses to cooperate. Claiming she's too busy, she promptly has the inspectors shown the door. Afterwards, she instructs the security guard to deny entry to the curious couple who had been snooping around the airfield. The tourists' already dire situation worsens as a thunderstorm approaches, but instead of seeking shelter, Kevin decides it's time to confront Dan and find out why he has prison tattoos on his body. Lisa orders the men to stop, reminding them that they have a common enemy and must stick together. She also reveals that someone stole all of their remaining ammunition. All they have left now is a single bullet for the shotgun. Despite the grim news, Kevin tells Zach about Dan's secret. The men confront Dan and demand that he come clean. With no choice left, Dan confesses that he had been involved in fraud schemes. That night, the storm finally hits, and Zach orders everyone to seek shelter in the wrecked plane. Of course, no one in the group manages to get any sleep, and tensions quickly rise, leading to more arguments among the survivors. Sonia asks everyone to be quiet and stands up to inspect the ceiling. She notices that water has suddenly started leaking through, and spotting signs of damage, the group decides to investigate further. Finally, Zach discovers the reason they were all being exterminated like lab rats, dozens of white bundles filled with banned powder. While everyone is busy discussing this, Amy once again runs off. Upon discovering her absence, Dan rushes to search for her, refusing any help from Zach. Still, the others decide to follow Dan anyway, unwilling to take any more risks. Lisa is the first to find the girl, appearing just in time to see a hooded figure raising a knife over Amy. Lisa manages to protect her friend and sends Amy back to the others, but she herself becomes the next victim of the mysterious maniac, never managing to see his face. Lisa's body is only found in the morning when the rain finally stops. Now it's clear to everyone that the woman had been telling the truth and that they are all under threat, making tensions among the group even worse. Sonia starts to suspect Zach, showing everyone the stolen bullets she found hidden in the woods. Besides the bullets, Lisa had discovered a gun, a radio capable of contacting the outside world, and a wallet, all hidden in Zach's secret stash before her death. Zach admits that he really is a cop and that the gun was indeed his. However, he claims he had never seen the radio before and that he certainly never dreamed of being stuck in the jungle with a bunch of strangers. Zach's words don't inspire much trust, and Dan snaps, punching him several times and demanding he give them the 5-digit code to unlock the radio. They tie Zach to a tree, and when he regains consciousness, Sonia again asks him for the code. The cop repeatedly tells her that he doesn't know it, that someone planted the radio on him, but Sonia refuses to listen. She insists on keeping Zach tied up, convincing herself that he is their main enemy. In the morning, Sonia gathers a small group to return to the hilltop and check the transmitter, which has still failed to bring them help. This time, the group no longer waits for cooler weather. They move under the scorching sun, suffering from thirst. Meanwhile, Kevin makes another attempt to talk to Zach. He demands the code, and when Zach refuses yet again, Kevin decides to beat it out of him. Sonia finds a disconnected wire and quickly restores it. At the same time, back in Houston, word reaches the authorities about a signal received from the jungle. Claire, Zach's partner and wife, tries to get permission to mount a rescue mission, but her boss urges caution. The signal is coming from Mexico, and it could be considered an unauthorized operation. When even the beatings fail, Kevin turns to medieval methods of extracting information. Zach's screams echo through the jungle, and Kevin clearly enjoys it. Eventually, Zach passes out from the pain. When he comes to, he opens his eyes to see a silhouette holding a knife. The figure turns out to be Sonia, but instead of hurting him, she cuts his bindings and sets him free. Meanwhile, the military base receives confirmation of the signal from the jungle. The commander immediately assembles a team and transmits the coordinates of the signal's origin. Kevin soon discovers that Zach has escaped. Trying to maintain control, he warns the others that the traitor is nearby, watching them. He orders everyone to stay put, but Dan has other ideas. He grabs Amy and warns the group that he'll shoot if anyone tries to follow. Contrary to Kevin's fears, Zach isn't stalking anyone. He's making his way alone to the top of the hill, intending to wait for rescue near the transmitter. He's not the only one waiting. Scattered across the jungle, the remaining survivors gaze hopefully at the sky, each of them dreaming of seeing a rescue helicopter. Separated from each other, both Sonia and Zach simultaneously sense danger and head off to find Dan and Amy. They manage to locate them soon enough, but by then it's too late. The couple lies dead, their backs riddled with a scattering of crimson holes. Kevin also arrives at the scene and, grabbing Dan's shotgun, points it at Sonia. All three start suspecting each other, threatening with weapons, and the standoff continues until a helicopter appears above the treetops. Unfortunately, their joy is short-lived. Due to thick clouds, the scouts fail to spot the missing people, and after circling, they turn the machine around and head back to the base. Sonia then proposes the only sensible solution: to climb to the summit and light a fire to attract the rescuers' attention. Meanwhile, Claire defies orders and flies to Mexico to find her husband, but her boss manages to alert the local authorities in time, and Claire is intercepted at the airport, prevented from moving further. A representative of the local department questions her about the purpose of her trip. Even the fact that one of the missing passengers is her husband does not make the Mexican official any more sympathetic. He advises Claire to prepare for deportation. Sonia and Zach begin their ascent to the summit together. Due to the injury Zach sustained during the interrogation, he moves very slowly, and they are forced to stop frequently to rest. During one of these breaks, the pair pieces everything together and comes to a realization: the real villain all along had been Kevin. Zach is convinced that once the helicopter arrives, Kevin will do something to prevent them from being rescued. But when a gunshot echoes through the jungle, Zach starts to have doubts. Kevin doesn't have a weapon and might now be in danger. The pair decides to go back and help Kevin first, planning to sort things out later, but they are too late. They find the man lying face down in a pond full of carnivorous fish, a bullet wound in his body. There's no longer any doubt that someone else is lurking in the jungle. Zach realizes that now they are in greater danger than ever, and to survive the night, he leads Sonia back to the wrecked plane, the only place where they can find some shelter. Once in relative safety, the two fall asleep, but the one who has been stalking them all along is lurking just outside the plane, reporting everything to Cora. Despite being so close, the unknown assailant makes no attempt to finish them off, and at dawn, Sonia and Zach set off again, determined to reach the summit as quickly as possible. They manage to do so, but there's a problem. The area is shrouded in thick fog, making it pointless to light a fire. All they can do now is wait and hope for a miracle. The silence of the foggy morning is broken by the sound of falling rocks, and Sonia looks around warily. Still, for some reason, she isn't deterred, and she ventures off to gather wood to try and start a fire. Zach tries to keep her in sight, sensing that something is wrong. And he's right. A hooded figure attacks Sonia, seizing her pistol and heading straight towards Zach. The cop realizes that his end is near, but before he dies, he asks the attacker a question. Why all this? Why couldn't they just let the passengers go, since none of them knew about the illicit cargo? Of course, Zach gets no answer. The attacker pulls the trigger and shoves Zach off the cliff. Only after this does the figure return to Sonia. She is luckier. Before dying, she manages to see the face of her killer. As the fog lifts, the rescue team finally spots the structure with the transmitter, and not far from it, the wreckage of the plane. Surveying the area, the team finds the camp, and for a moment, hope flickers that some passengers might have survived, but that hope is quickly dashed. The scouts find 9 bodies, neatly laid out side by side. The commissioner visits Claire at her hotel and gives her the number of the flight she must take to leave the country. However, he also hands her a pass to the military base, where the 9 bodies from the jungle have just been brought. Dr. Sofia Dehara contacts the military base where she is to conduct the autopsies. She insists that the commander not touch anything until she arrives. This phone call is overheard by the couple in the pickup truck, who continue to watch the base, waiting for the helicopter carrying the bodies. The 9 large body bags are carried directly into the morgue building. After confirming that all 9 are present, the mission supervisor approaches the commander and requests to be sent back to the original search grid. Judging by how neatly the bodies were arranged, someone else had been there and they needed to find them. The commander tries to dissuade his men, but since the majority want to go back, he is forced to give in. The helicopter lifts off and heads toward the hill. Meanwhile, Dr. Dehara arrives at the base. A little before reaching her destination, she notices Claire changing a tire on a rental car, but the doctor drives past, eager to get to the morgue. Inside the morgue, one of the body bags stirs to life. Its occupant cuts his way through the thick material from the inside and crawls out. Noticing a second car by the roadside, Dejara decides to pull over. The sweet-looking girl doesn't seem suspicious, and the doctor cheerfully gives her directions to the military base, for which she receives several bullets in return. The revived patient turns out to be Kevin. While he recovers from being trapped in the rubber bag, the fake Dr. Dejara infiltrates the military base. Before allowing her into the morgue, the commander tries to build rapport and understand why they had been instructed not to touch the bodies. These questions make Cora visibly nervous, and she demands to be allowed to begin her work immediately. She is escorted to the morgue, and the soldier assigned to her receives a knockout blow from Kevin. By now, Kevin has already prepared the bodies for inspection, gutting everything that was hidden inside them. The gruesome scene doesn't faze the lovers. Cora throws herself into Kevin's arms, kissing him in gratitude for executing the plan so brilliantly. Unaware of the betrayal, the commander meets Claire and informs her that the bodies are currently being examined by a pathologist. Claire insists on being allowed in to identify the bodies herself, to confirm with her own eyes whether there's any hope left, or if Zach is truly dead. At the same time, against all odds, Zach opens his eyes. Though unable to stand, he pulls out his sunglasses and uses them to flash a distress signal at the helicopter with sunlight reflections. Kevin and Cora set fire to the bodies, grab the bags filled with white bundles smuggled from the jungle, and make their escape. Their vehicle crashes through all the barriers, and while the Mexican soldiers scramble to react, the pair manages to flee. Claire learns that her husband is alive and rushes to the hospital to see him. She finds Zach severely injured, but the most important thing is that he's alive and that they can still go home together. As soon as Zach regains some strength and gives his first statements, he's already itching for action again. He's certain Cora will return to her aviation company, believing no witnesses survived, and that's exactly where they can finally catch both her and Kevin. Finally, Zach pieces everything together. When the plane crashed, Kevin was on the brink of disaster. If rescuers had arrived immediately, he would have lost the valuable cargo hidden beneath the fuselage. That's when he had a brilliant idea, to use the survivors themselves to transport the bundles. Kevin didn't rush things. He acted methodically, enjoying the process of making the survivors hate and distrust each other, making them even easier to pick off. Kevin recounts the entire story to Cora during breakfast, but his openness costs her dearly. She suddenly falls ill, and Kevin calmly reveals that there were tropical mushrooms in her omelet. Listening to the pilot's final message, Kevin realized exactly whom it had been intended for, and he had no intention of forgiving Cora's betrayal. Police vehicles arrive at the airfield, but the muffled roar of an engine makes it clear that the team is too late. Zach fires several rounds at Kevin's plane, but it seems to bring him no closer to victory, or so Zach believes. He doesn't realize that a couple of those bullets hit their mark, and high above the green jungle, Kevin's plane begins to fail.